Hey everyone, Noble Absinthe here, and today I wanted to talk to you about the stats in Shin Megami Tensei. In today's Game Design Discussion. It's a working title. Tell me if you like it. Now, I want to preface by saying I love this franchise, but the way in which they go about explaining these stats and how they work is, well, it's very amateur. I also need to preface, I'm not a game developer or a paid programmer, just a guy who overthinks about video games. Anyway, stats in Shin Megami Tensei. They are inconsistent and unbalanced, and I don't think that's really good game design. Or maybe it is, I don't know, you tell me. Personally, I think there's no rules to game design as long as you achieve that fun experience. But to me, stats are a very core part of RPGs. Like, on paper, they're very important. You know, back in the days of playing Dungeons & Dragons, they show what kind of person and mentality your character has. If you're running a character with high magic stat and a low vitality, you're likely a glass cannon, typically reflective of a wise wizard with a frail frame. Or, if you have high HP and a decent attack stat, you're a stalwart knight prepared for battle. Or you're a caveman. Having a high agility makes you the elusive speedster who dodges attacks while aiming for that chance to crit. And a high luck? Well, you guys are the charming con man able to make your way out of any situation. Now, in a perfect game, all routes can lead to success and be perfectly viable. That's why I love Fallout. But, of course, they should come with their fair share of downsides to give a player that unique experience. If you're really charming, that means if you get into an altercation, you're probably gonna die. And if you're really strong, you're probably an idiot. But here's the thing. In Shin Megami Tensei, you only have two options. Maxing out the strength or magic stat. And if you don't, well, then you're kinda screwed. Let's go over the stats. Strength, as the name would imply, affects your physical strength moves, like basic attacks and physical spells. With this strategy, you're typically not abusing the press turn system. That's where you exploit a weakness to get another action for the turn, since the only time it applies to you is with a critical hit. And let me tell you, landing a critical hit is like playing the lottery. More on that later. The major drawback of strength builds is most of the physical spells are cost inefficient, and you might put yourself in lethal damage range just to do your damage, since your HP pool is your resource. And this especially is true with boss fights, where you're likely not going to one-shot them. Usually you're going to want a healer and/or buff and debuff user as an insurance policy. Also, for some reason, physical attacks can just miss. They just straight up miss. This is because it has this inherent miss rate that is factored with agility. I think. I'm not sure.
I'm not entirely sure.
This isn't really well explained, and no one knows how it really works, and that is kinda why I'm making this video. Things like damage numbers and accuracy percentages just aren't shown, and that's just weird to me. Maybe it's because I've been spoiled with Pokemon, but to me, Pokemon is the example RPG to live up to, and you have to wonder why a company like Atlus doesn't just show us the numbers. I like hitting things with a big club, and I want to know how much I'm going to do with that club, aside from just taking your word for it. Obviously, I'm going to use the big Unga Bunga phrase, heavy damage over moderate damage, but I want to know exactly that number. I care about big number.
Big number!
For some reason, there's like a variance in damage too in these games. It's weird. Even on the same enemy, a non-boosted attack can hit for a range of like plus or minus 5 points. So how is this stuff even calculated? Like, on another note, is power charge and mind charge even worth it? I just tested it and used a percent change calculator and only got a damage increase of 2.0 times. And sometimes in other games, like in Persona, it's like a 2.5 multiplier. That is so annoying. So in some games it's trash because you could just attack twice. In other times it's OP and it's ridiculous. But who knows, you know, maybe the ends justify the means when it comes to strength. SMT usually rewards strength build players by giving a super OP final attack, like Furekugel in Nocturne or Ragnarok in Digital Devil Saga. It's the super big club for us caveman players. Which, even then, I'm not sure if that's good game design either. I mean, maybe it is. You as the player, let's break this down. You as the player have suffered by actively not playing to the game's strength, by not going magical. And now, you get rewarded with an OP physical move that invalidates magic. In my opinion, magic players get shafted. I mean, what do they get? They get almighty magic, which is cost inefficient, it can't exploit a weakness for another press turn because magic can't crit, and it's not even all that powerful. Speaking of magic, the magic stat affects your magical attacks. Go figure. It increases your mana and, in some games, your magic defense. Then what's the point of vitality? So now we have a resistance value that does a % reduction that isn't even clear. Awesome. Anyway, you typically want to abuse the press turn system with magic, and it gives a puzzle-solving element to the game. If something breathes fire or looks like it's on fire, it's likely to absorb fire, right? Makes sense. And what's the opposite of fire? Ice, and that's usually the weakness. And sometimes, the game can be straight up mean. It just throws you through a loop and tricks you. Screw you, Heat. I like magic, and if I get stuck, I can always just use the Wikipedia page to read up on the correct element to use. And usually, while I'm doing that, I read up on the history of these mythological figures. These games are just chock full of so many gods and demons and mythological figures that's really fascinating to read. I feel cultured playing these games. So yeah, magic is fun, and it feels like Atlus knows most players go for magic by having bosses erect shields or have inconvenient for us resistances. There was clearly more testing for magic users than us caveman physical users. But at the end of the day, both are great ways to play the game, with magic being the quote-unquote safer route, usually. But in my opinion, physical is just more rewarding because you get that big awesome attack at the end, and, you know, big number.
Big number!
Now for the other stats. Those are vitality, agility, and luck. No one really cares about these stats. Vitality is probably the best as it gives you more HP, and that's it. Players typically put a single point in this every few levels to avoid being one-shot by a Bufu spell. Since magic boosts your defense, one has to wonder, why even bother? You could just boost magic. In fact, that's what I did in Digital Devil Saga, Nocturne, and SMT4. Just get stupidly big and who cares about HP? I mean, just put a point every 5 levels. Agility seems sensible at first. It helps with evading your opponent's attacks and making sure your physical attacks land. I think. I mean, it's honestly game dependent. But let's take a step back. If you invest a lot in agility and still miss a basic attack or get hit by a basic attack, it makes the investment feel worthless, doesn't it? People say it makes you go first, but that's game dependent. For example, in Digital Devil Saga, there's a skill which allows you to attack first. It's called First Strike, and turn order of your characters is always assigned left to right. Always. So that's just kind of weak. And just as a sidebar, that's another complaint I have about stats. Stats aren't the same throughout all the games. You need to verify what does what. Of course, back in the old days of gaming, you'd go to GameFAQs and just go on the message boards, but I think video games should be self-contained resources. It should be all right there in the manual. And, you know, for the PS2 games, I do have the physical manuals, but I mean a manual inside the game. And hey, even the real-world manual just glosses over the stat descriptions. The last one is luck, and this is a weird one. It affects drop rates of items, crit rate, and the chances of being hit by ailments, and instant death spells, or recovering from ailments. Again, it's inconsistent across games, and just like my issue with agility, if you don't crit or get a quick heal from an ailment, all that investment feels wasted. I put an investment of 75 luck in Digital Devil Saga 2 and still couldn't land a crit more than half the time. That is ridiculous. As you can see, the 3 other stats are not like magic and strength. You can't spec into them for any real immediate benefit. You only really feel the impact if they're maxed out, and even then, it's kind of a toss-up. Now you might say, who maxes agility of all stats? Well, Cielo does, and hey, someone who wants to see what happens? If it's an option, why not explore it? Every stat should have its inherent pros and cons. I liken it to Dark Souls, Pokemon, or League of Legends. You can choose any build, and while it might not be optimal, it can still be functional, and you can see and feel the impacts of your investment. Building a poison build in Dark Souls or a tank Teemo build in League of Legends might not be optimal, but it can be fun. You would think going all strength or magic means you're probably going to be a glass cannon. You know, you get hit once and you shatter, but the reality is that I was fine with very minimal vitality in most SMT games. I also landed about 80% of my hits without any real agility investment, and if I did miss, who cares, it happened barely any of the time. So, you just dealt with it. Maxing agility should make you feel like the Matador from Nocturne, completely untouchable, and you would be landing all your attacks. It should be a great feeling knowing that your investment paid off. All this agility actually means something, and the same should go for luck and vitality. If I invest in vitality, I should feel like an unkillable tank, face-blocking attacks that rip my party down to shreds. Your weakness should be instant death spells as a counterbalance. Honestly, across all the games, they should have a skill that taunts enemies to focus on you, so you can make use of that large HP stat, and not that nonsense taunt skill that is essentially swagger from Pokemon. In DDS2, there is a ring to draw aggro, but I never really felt it did anything. Now, for luck, how cool would it be if having a high luck stat gave you end-level items in the early game, where enemies are still using low-level spells? Like you would have an Agi-Dyne item when everyone else is using Agi. That'd be so cool. You would most likely build support, but you can still do respectable damage through items. The act of using your item pouch would be way more tactile of an experience since you have limited resources. When you go magical or strength, you're only really using your item pouch for the occasional revive or the desperate heal, and maybe a shield. Honestly, I think Atlus figured that their stat system kinda bites when they made the Persona franchise. In the Persona games, your stats are predetermined, and you usually fuse up your Personas for stronger ones. You don't really use those skill cards to level up your stats. I mean, people who like to do those challenges do, but generally speaking, people fuse up to get better stats. The stats you get are what you get, and typically, the higher the level, the better it is. It takes away the sense of customization for a more streamlined approach, and it works. Bigger level means bigger number by default. But I don't know, I don't really like that it takes away user choice. I love min-maxing my stats. It's what makes my character unique. It's the role-playing part of role-playing games. If you're an aspiring game developer, you should have extensive playtesting in your games. While it might seem incomprehensibly stupid that a player would invest everything into speed or vitality, you're gonna have to account for those players and the phenomenon known as player-induced insanity. Or at the very least, make it so that those players can reconfigure their stats when they want. Remember, if they got to that point in the game, it meant that what they were doing worked. Those players earned their experience points. Let them redistribute them. Thank you everyone for watching. If you liked the video, please feel free to subscribe, drop a comment, I do read all of them, and I want to announce that this channel will be more SMT focused. There's a lot of Shin Megami Tensei anime, characters, games, and just overall stuff to cover, and it helps keep my ADHD in check. You know, if I focus on one topic for a while. I might do the occasional one-off video, but I really want Shin Megami Tensei to be my bread and butter for this channel. You guys know how much I love Persona 4 and how much it meant to me, and I love to cover these games. So that's what I'll be doing from now on. So like, share, sub, all that good stuff, share my videos, and remember, have a good day.